In this land, some 25,000 miles of highways stretch across broad valleys, follow lake shoreline and river, and climb into high mountain passes to form a network, the dramatic story of which is equaled only by the ingredients that went into it. Widely dispersed cities depend to a considerable extent on these highways. Suffering from the acute growing pains of increased commerce and traffic, their long-time concern was to get raw materials to Vancouver, the major seaport in the province. For between the two, interior town and seaboard, was a topographical bottleneck that until recently restricted the flow of this vital lifeline. It was the Fraser Canyon. The first white men to encounter the rigors of the Fraser Canyon were voyageurs of the Northwest Company, a Canadian organization, representatives of which had carried their flag more than 3,000 miles across the North American continent to establish fur trading posts and seek a possible river route to the Pacific Ocean. Leader of this expedition was Simon Fraser, a Scot. On June 26, 1808, he wrote in his diary, "I have been a long period in the Rocky Mountains, but have never seen anything like this country. It is so wild that I cannot find words to describe our situation at times." Fraser was faced with the terrifying thunder of water as it tore at rock, narrow necks where torrents rushed through, and on either side, grim, ominous mountains. This, together with Indian hostility, was to prove too much for the adventurers, for disheartened and weary, they were forced to turn back when less than a mile from the Strait of Georgia. Thus it was the Fraser Canyon was left to itself, a place where nature had made her blueprints grandiose and where the ages-old concern of the native Indian was food. Whereas Simon Fraser came south, there were those who, some half a century later, in the spring of 1858, headed north. Among them were three, from whose activities great things were destined to be. History has it that these three, busy in their search for gold several miles upriver from the settlement of Hope, sat down to eat lunch one day. One, however, presumably less patient than the others, cut his meal short and went back to the river. Though he could not be aware of it then, his decision was to have far-reaching effects upon the place that hitherto had known little but brooding loneliness. And so it was, the world heard the news. Inflamed by the prospect of gold, men raced to the Fraser Canyon. Hudson Bay Company's Fort Yale was deluged with new settlers, for gold in considerable amounts had been won from the river. Other spots, like Boston Bar, were also to become prominent in history. Whereas such discoveries often led to scheming and intrigue, as well as hard-fisted rivalry, most formed partnerships and worked and searched together. Some had penetrated the canyon to the forks, where the Thompson joins the Fraser River. Others beyond. And then far to the north, from a mere trickle of water, Williams Creek, came the most explosive of all news. And the rush was on. From the remote corners of the earth, men sought the newfound wealth. In doing so, and by following the canyon, they laid the design for British Columbia's first recognized trail to the northern interior. Pack-laden, they picked their steps along the dangerous rock faces. They made ladders Indian fashion and fastened them together with thongs. A perilous undertaking it was, for it needed only one miscalculated move, one foot slip, to send them hurtling downwards. And as they went, the Fraser Canyon showed no mercy. Some kept on in spite of it all. Others, exhausted and utterly spent, turned back. Nevertheless, there were survivors who battled on to Williams Creek. On the banks of Williams Creek, Barkerville burst forth to world prominence almost overnight. Soon it was the largest town in British Columbia, inhabited by more than 10,000 people drawn from many walks of life and from many lands to hack and dig for the precious stuff called gold. Meantime, their previously established mining centers became stopping places for the human tide that ebbed and flowed. To assist Governor James Douglas, detachments of Royal Engineers were sent from England in 1858 and 1859. Their duties were for civilian purposes rather than for defense reasons. They were to survey those parts considered most suitable for development, public purposes, seat of government, and mark out where roads should be located. By 1861, they had encountered the most laborious of all their tasks, to find a way through the terrifying and awesome canyon country between Yale and Lytton to the north. This 60-mile stretch was a stranglehold upon the artery necessary for the development of the interior and north country. The Royal Engineers surveyed this territory and built the 6 most difficult miles east of Yale themselves, the remainder being built by government contract. The horse-drawn slip scraper was a prime earth mover in the arduous job. This mobile scoop was an improvement on the wheelbarrow and held about as much with no shoveling involved. Working in pairs, they whipsawed the great trees from end to end. These they knit together to span creek and gorge. They located the site where Joseph Trutch was to build the Alexandra Bridge north of Spuzzum, and by sheer muscle power and long hours of labor, dovetailed massive timbers against precipice and outcropping to form the road. Though many weird and wonderful modes of transportation were to be tried out following this incredible road-building program, man was to find the horse his staunchest friend. They toiled together to supply stopping places with provisions and bring much-needed equipment to those settlers who already regarded this other country as home. It was an important step in the development of what was to become known as British Columbia, and encouraged others to strike out for the vast horizons and challenges expected from such an undertaking. This was the age of the stagecoach, of the clomp of hooves and the strange, harsh rhythm of ironclad wheels on Trestle Bridge and Gravel Mountain Pass, of men's far-flung thoughts and dreams as they were sped farther and farther into the new land. Notwithstanding, maintaining road communications was a never-ending battle. Landslides, cave-ins, and long, bitter winters were characteristic of this defiant canyon. Respite came in 1886. Freight and supplies could now be moved quicker and cheaper. Though lonely, isolated men hailed the development, introduction of the railway meant it took over much of the road traffic. So for the next 35 years, little more than the clank of steel and the plaintive voice of steam echoed in the canyon fastness. It wasn't until the 1920s that road-making activity was resumed, and again, with shovel and pull grader, the horse was to play his part beside man. But soon a speedier ally arrived. This was a boon, whereas man formerly had to be content with loads of 100 pounds apiece, he could now shovel in 10 times that amount. From the development, he received new enthusiasm and encouragement. Indeed, an entirely new outlook towards the formidable task ahead. He felled the tall trees and used them for bridges. One of them, 9 Mile Creek between Boston Bar and Cisco, and over remains of the Alexandra Bridge destroyed by floods in 1894. And on the original piers, he built a new modern crossing. By 1926, the road through the Fraser Canyon had been rebuilt to a tolerable standard. 2 small tunnels blasted through solid rock solved one of the many problems. Otherwise, the highway proper, though relocated, remained much the same as formerly, an intricate, twisted mountain way, not without its hazards. Motoring was thus regarded as a feature in a person's life, an adventure with heated moments. The beginning of the 1950s saw the highway blacktopped, but still largely following the narrow, winding route of 1926. Some of the old trestles were still there, clinging to the rock faces. So were the almost blind corners, many wide enough for only one vehicle. And in places nothing between road and river, 600 feet and more below. Then came an entirely new era. Man of today, mobile in his trailer and with power at his touch, came on the scene to challenge the canyon. He sighted well and with much care along the backbone of mountains confronting him at every turn. Then, when this was done, forced his way through with fire and bulldozer. Pulled by one machine and pushed by another, the blade of his carry-all sliced into the earth and picked up fill from high points, 30 tons at a time, that would raise low areas. He spread it evenly, each great load nothing more than a spoonful in the huge ravine he had to fill to eliminate a steep downgrade and a bridge crossing. His bits ground into the rock. Each hole was charged with dynamite, often many thousands of pounds to the mile. For long ago it had become plain that this canyon was no ordinary job. He connected the charges and ran long lengths of fuse wire to a point of safety. The Fraser Canyon was about to undergo severe treatment. Thus it was done, by day and far into the night. Heavy machines maneuvered into position among the debris and lifted and swung the huge chunks onto a fleet of trucks that came and went, taking away loads that would be utilized to raise low-lying spots in the roadbed. Where they couldn't skirt the mountains, hard rock drillers tunneled their way into the darkness and let in the light. Permanent steel bridges took the extended line of highway far above river and gorge. Then on the other side, machines again took over to spread and compact the sand and gravel layer upon layer until the surface was built up to grade level. Asphalt blacktopping, prepared on site by portable plants, was laid down exactly a lane in width and to specified depths to follow the classical contours of the new highway as it curved through the scenic grandeur. Traffic lines, the final touches, would henceforth mark the controlled and safe passing sections, and so make sure the motorist traveled with minimum driving hazards. Such, so far, is the story of the Fraser Canyon in British Columbia. Man, with his machines and advanced techniques, has taken the heartbreak out of traveling by gouging the mountains and accomplishing what would undoubtedly seem miracles to those who first encountered the territory. The bottleneck has gone, and where a day's hard going was once measured in a few miles, the modern counterpart of gold seeker and settler covers a similar distance in a few minutes to the music of his car radio. With all that, and to those who so wish to read, the story of the Fraser Canyon can still be traced on Old Road and Side Hill Crag. The essence and character remain essentially the same. The river boils and rages, and above it all, inscrutable and austere, mist-enshrouded peaks look on.